Hello, I don't know if you can see this. Welcome to Michael John. As you can see, I am back at our academy on Oldham Street in the Northern Quarter. Now, I am streaming this using a different data feed, so I'm not quite sure how this is going to work this session. I'm really keen to get your feedback as I go through this session today to see how the feed comes through, how the sound comes through, and if there's anything that I can do to improve your experience. I'm now based here at our academy on Oldham Street in the Northern Quarter of Manchester. I am upstairs in our learning hub, formerly known as the studio to you former learners. So today I've actually got a block prepared for you, a mannequin, and I'm going to be taking you through a restyle haircut that is below shoulder length. Drop me some feedback as we go through, just by a little thumbs up or just a yes, as to whether you can hear me and that the quality is coming through okay on the feed. If it doesn't, I'm going to carry on anyway because I'm actually recording this onto my device, and I'll then be able to upload it to our YouTube channel, which will give us the best, clearest feed, and I'm going to hyperlink it into the Pivot Point course for this week. Now, this class is actually for Monday curriculum learners, so if you attend our academy on a Monday, studying your MVQ Level 2 in hairdressing, and you're in your second year, coming towards the end, this is definitely a session for you. Today, I'm going to be taking this one length below shoulder haircut, and I'm going to be doing a restyle below shoulder. Now, this haircut is perfect to do if you're coming towards the end of your course and you're coming up for an endpoint assessment or a promotion within your salon where you've got to do a trade test, or you may be at the point in your career that you've decided to move on from the salon you're currently working in, you're getting ready to be trade tested, and this is the perfect haircut to do. A lot of women these days, as we know, wear their hair below shoulder. Sometimes to find that above shoulder restyle can be really challenging, which is why at the EPA, one of the looks needs to be below shoulder and one needs to be above. It doesn't necessarily have to be a haircut above or below, just one or the other, but you need to have at least performed a certain technique below shoulder and above shoulder. Later this week, I'll be uploading onto our Instagram TV a 5-minute micro lecture on the process of EPA, endpoint assessment, and how you can help prepare for that through effective model selection. Okay, so I'm going to crack on. Keep giving me feedback, guys. If it's not coming through, give me a shout. I'm working on a different data feed here, so I'm not quite sure if this is going to pan out yet. It's all a bit trial and error today, but never mind, we'll get there. As you can see, I've got one length. It's perfectly one length, no layers whatsoever. I'm working to quite an extreme side parting. What I'm going to create today is a really shattered layered effect. I'm not going to change the length at all. I'm just going to point cut into it quite deeply to create a really textured edge. I'm going to work with a triangular shape through the back. So I'm going to be taking this triangular shape through by elevating away from the length and towards the interior to create this triangle shape layer through here. Same through the sides and also the back. So everything sort of goes on that line. It's almost like this triangle, like a triangle. Triangular layer. Lots of over direction away from the length because we want to leave that very long and shattered, but I want to create a really interesting interior shape. Something that's got a lot of texture, a lot of movement, so that if I was being assessed, whether it was an endpoint assessment or a trade test, or whether I was going for a new job, I'd want them to really see that I was able to change the texture of the hair and really showcase my skills. When you're particularly going for an endpoint assessment, of course you're going to want to go for that distinction grade, and this is the haircut that I would highly recommend for you to consider when planning your models and also what techniques you want to showcase. I'm going to be block cutting all the way through the layering pattern because I like to work with structure first, and then that also includes the fringe, because there will be a fringe that will be disconnected, a side fringe that come over one eye but disconnected. There'll be some graduation through the sides as well, quite tapered and quite layered. I'm going to be using block cutting and a little bit of slide cutting, so slice cutting through here. So that's two techniques. Then on the third, fourth and fifth techniques, I'm going to be, once it's dried, I'm going to be point cutting into the hair, I'm going to be slicing through the hair, and I'm going to be channel cutting through the hair. I won't do those techniques until it's dried, so I'm going to do 2 lives today. I'm going to do a wet cut, I'm going to blow dry, and then I'll come back and do the dry techniques. And this is great because you want to showcase your abilities to work with wet and dry hair when being assessed, say for APA, trade test, whatever is coming next in your career. I've made a division at the parting. It's slightly diagonal back, going through to the crown. I've made a division, our classic division that we always make to separate from back, from crown, through to the furthest point behind each ear, as we can see here and here. And now I'm going to take a central section, central division, all the way down the back to establish my guide. Now, we're working with quite a large section at the back, it's quite a lot of hair, and I'm going to show you that in just a moment's time, just once I've divided it through. Hope you guys can see, okay, a little bit of an experiment today. First time I'm shooting a live at our academy based on Oldham Street. And this is going to be my first section, as you can see. About a section's width, working through there. And we're going to be working with about approximately that direction. So I'm going to direct away from the length and towards the weight. And then I'm going to be able to cut a shape through here. That's actually going to give it lots of texture and movement through the back. So, significant amount of length reduction, particularly in the interior, but we are leaving it below shoulder. The criteria at an endpoint assessment is to change the shape of the hair through cutting through a restyle technique, and this would definitely constitute it. Sometimes people tend to think restyles as, you know, it has to be long and then it has to go short, but that's not really the case. You're changing the shape and the texture and the movement. A one length hair cut becoming a layered haircut with a disconnected fringe would definitely be sufficient. This section's quite large, as you can see here. Quite a large section working through. I'm going to divide that, and I'm going to start by layering the under section first and then work through to the top section, because it's too much really for me to handle. So I'm just going to take that section, twist it and place it over there. You could put a clip in it if you like, but again, I don't really think that's necessarily needed, really. So I've got that first section here. I'm working on the elevation, so elevate away from the length, because we don't want to change it, and we're working towards the weight. I've got my scissors, pretty essential tool when doing a restyle, and I'm working through. Now I can see already this part of the hair has actually dropped away, can you see? So it's all dropping away. Now that indicates to me that I've actually directed away enough from the length to actually make sure that I don't alter it, and I'm going to start by working through a line. I'm going to measure that down to see where the layering is going to... I always do this on my first section because I like to see its reaction. What I'm doing here is I'm just seeing how it's going to react, and we can already see some really interesting texture coming through. So again, so we've just layered that section through there, and then that's going to give us a lot of texture that we want to create, because we want this to be really textured, lots of different movement working through this haircut. Now I've already established my guide for this section, so I can now start to work through this central panel. And I do take it in sections. I like to work quite small sections. I always just think of the motto, break it down into bite-sized pieces. If you've got too much hair in your hands, you're going to look like you're struggling to manage it. And from my experience, a lot of trade tests, I've done a lot of trade tests, I've had a lot of jobs, you've got to look like you know what you're doing, and just having this really super professional sectioning will give you that ability to look like you're carrying it out in a really professional manner. And it does help with the overall look. I'm a passionate believer in neat sections, neat cut. So as I lift it up, you can see that's the guide from underneath. I'm just going to show you that. That's the guide there from underneath. And now we're lifting straight up, and we're going to cut the line from short to long. Just block cut that through. And then I'm going to elevate this back slightly, but I'm still going to have quite a high elevation. So in comparison to where the head is, so that's where the head is, so you're elevating back, so you're not going round, otherwise they'll end up too short at the crown. But still keep quite a high elevation. And then just work through. When you get to this final section here, just round off the corner slightly. This will help soften that final layer and not create such a wedge because sometimes they can look a bit wedged. Do you know when you're directing at this angle, at low crown, they can look a bit like a line in the back. I always just round off that very corner because it really helps just soften that when you fall it down. I'm going to now tease the hair in this section that I've just cut just to see how it's reacting. Yes, it's really cool actually. Already we can see that the hair is reacting really well. It's actually got a lot of movement, a lot of texture in there. And I'm already thinking that maybe this interior would need a lot of texturizing, which is really cool because it means that when I actually work through the section, sorry, I just caused a little bit of a tangle there. When I work through the section, I'm going to be able to really sort of showcase what I'm actually doing. So I'm just working through, that's great. I'm now taking the next section. I'm going to direct these sections back towards the previous section, so I'll show you that in just a moment. Keep your sections neat and take your time. So I'm just going to make sure that everything's nice and neat. We're directing straight from the length all the way down, all the way up. And I'm going to do the same as before. I'm just going to take this section here and I'm just going to twist it and move it away because that's going to enable me to work on these under sections first. And I can now direct that through, and you can see the direction that I've actually pulled the hair in, and I'm just layering that through. Now I'm going to change this angle slightly so you can see from a different point of view. And we can see all this. I'm directing slightly back towards the centre. I want to gradually make the layers longer towards the front, because you don't want to overlay the front. Remember, we have less hair to work with at the front. And I'm just block cutting. The reason why I'm block cut is because I like structure. I can shatter the shape at the end. Now, in order to actually assess whether this has actually worked, I'm just going to take this section here, and I'm just going to lift up, and it should come in a slight triangle shaped line like that. You see my fingers are pointing away. That's because that section was pulled slightly towards there, so it leaves it longer and longer, hence why we call it triangular layers. I'm just going to refine that on the very edge, and that's my cross check. I'm going to subdivide now this next section slightly. Everything's directed towards the centre. I'm going to show you this technique in just a second. Let me make sure I'm really nice and neat. And it's pretty quick, actually. It's pretty quick to actually do it. It's not really sort of something that you'll find too sort of challenging. So we're now working with a slightly larger section, which is really good. Why it's good to break them down, and why I actually like to sort of work on this under section first. And you can see I'm just putting my comb in there, right in the scalp, making sure I don't touch this area that I've just folded away temporarily. Because again, we want to create this really nicely layered shape. And I can see the guide. I'm just working through, I lost the guide there slightly. Just going to go back through and do that once more. There we go. And again, I'm just using a very controlled technique, placing my fingers on there. And now I'm going to take this section above it. I'm going to just tip that away because I'm really layering this shape through the interior, you see. That's why I have to do it in sections. And I'm directing away from the sides towards that centre. And that's going to give me that texture that I really want. And it will enable to ensure that I don't overlay the hair. You can see that direction. Look, you see, it grows from here, but I'm actually pulling it much further up and away. And I'm going to show you the roundness of the shape as we reach the top layer. So we're directing slightly back, and you can see that's the guide. And then just work through. Any feedback on the feed, guys, and the sound that's coming through would be most helpful at any point in this session. That would be really great. Okay, and I'm just sort of really checking that through. I'm just seeing how the hair's reacting to the technique. I always see how it's reacting, always, every time I cut a section I do this. I'm just looking to see how it's reacting to the way I'm cutting it, and then it will actually give me, it will interpret my intention for the shape. I am actually going to divide some of this away now because the sections become much too large for me to able to handle in an effective way. So I've just taken some of this away. I'm still going to be directing towards that centre back, so you'll see my direction in a moment. I'm really combing this hair through. I'm just going to take this lower panel here first, just twist, and then I'll just place that over there. It will stay if you twist it right. And then I'm just working through, just making sure I'm directing that nice and neatly. And it's just a slight bit there, working through, that's great. And then direct that towards the centre back. So pulling it all the way over. You can see where this section actually grows from. And now we're pulling it all the way back. This is how you create that triangular shape with a triangular layer. And it creates that really extreme texture variation from something quite shorter at the crown to quite longer in the interior. And I am slightly rounding the shape just a little bit, just at the crown, because I find that can get a heavy weight distribution. So I'm just going to give this a shake, and you can see already what we've created is something that's got lots of texture and movement through there, and it's actually really altered and changed the shape when we look at the other side, can you see? So this is all one length and very smooth, but instantly we create this lightness, this aerated feeling. So visually, from a visual point of view, this is going to look really stunning when you're actually performing this, say at an endpoint assessment or a trade test. And we've got lots of learners that are coming up for their endpoint assessments, and we're very excited about it, and that's why I really wanted to showcase this haircut, because this is definitely the haircut that I would do if I was doing an endpoint assessment, because I think it's got really cool impact on it. I just love it. I'm going to take my division from front and back once more, but this division is actually going to just include some of the back section as a guide, and then going to direct this up and back towards the crown. And you're going to see this now once I bring her back. I'm going to take all of this section that I'm actually going to be working with. You see, so that's it. I'm just going to quickly show you once more. That's the section. It's over directed back towards the crown. And you want to cut a line from short to long. So you'll see the guide working through, and then cut a line. And this will just give you that really textured layer through the top, whilst retaining, I knew she was going to do that. Excuse me, it's my client's moving. There we go. This is just going to give you that really nice textured layer just for the top, but it's going to retain your length as well, because we're going to be texturizing a lot of the front using different techniques. And then interestingly, what you'll see is that I'm directing all of this section all the way back. So that's the direction. When in doubt, when cutting the front, pull it back. I never, very rarely, actually layer, say, at this angle. That'd be more like a graduation technique going forward. I typically tend to over-direct most of my layers back, because I find that it leaves me with enough length, so that would be the actual angle. Can you see how it's pulling back? And then that, technically, is the line. Let's try and move that. Triangular and triangular. Triangular shape with a triangular line creates this really interesting effect. The shape is the way we pull it. The line is the way that we cut it. And I'm just going through, I'm just really refining that. I'm going to do a cross-check now, and you'll see on the cross-check what we've created. And again, there's lots of opportunities to create something interesting here. So I'm just going to take horizontal. I'm going to pull it straight up, and what you'll see is we've created this triangular line, so it'll go up like that. So it'll be longer in the front and shorter in the interior. And of course, if you've got any areas that you want to refine, you can refine those. And that's going to give us a shape that's not necessarily changed too much on the perimeter. We've still got these long lengths, same as the other side, but what we've done is we've created this really interesting interior, which once dried will then refine further by creating a lot more different techniques, such as the slice cutting and the carved inlayers, which I'm quite excited to showcase to you, the carved inlay technique. Again, just one of those techniques that you're really going to sort of think, this kind of really showcases my skills, and this is something I could take to an employer. And it's a bit like a wow factor when you work with like alternative cutting techniques like point cutting, slice cutting and all those different techniques. I've taken a section on the opposite side. I've now returned back to centre crown, right through to the nape. I've taken another section that will include the guide from this first side and also enough from the next side. I work the same process through, so I'm just going to take this section, clip it away. That would be the division there. I'm going to elevate this hair away from the length towards the interior. I'll be able to see the guide. Here we go, there it is. That's from the opposite side, and then that's the beginning of the layer. I can now take another section from there, just enough for me to handle, and then continue this layering pattern. I can clearly see my guide. If you cannot clearly see your guide, it means that you're not working with enough hair from the other side, so you need to maybe change the amount of hair that you've pulled in. Naturally, we want to start pulling this slightly back because we don't want to overlay the top and the sides, but I'm gonna, once I've done that, round off that layer slightly just to alleviate that edge. You can actually see that little corner there. Just by rounding off that little corner on that layer, it just really softens that last few layers that sit on the crown, and I like that. I'll point cut these as well, of course, but I want to show you the technical version of the haircut before I show you the more artistic approach, which is what we do to refine, finesse, wow our clients, wow the people who are assessing us, you know, different stuff like that, really. You know, and just put a bit of showmanship, you know, if there was one thing I was going to teach you about being a hairdresser, you know, one thing that I learned many, many years ago was being on the salon floor is like being on a stage, and we've got to really showcase our ability to work in a creative way, and clients love this. So just by showcasing techniques that they may have not seen in other salons can really help you set yourself apart from your competition. I'm directing this towards the centre. You'll see that I'm pulling this away, and again I'm just working through the sections nice and gently, and I'm making sure I'm combing straight from the root. That's important also. And I'm making, there we go, and you can see, and I'm really starting to change the shape of the interior. And then finally, and then round off your corner at the top. Take a horizontal at this stage to assess that you have achieved balance from one side to the other. Oops. Still finding my feet back at Michael John. It's, yes, again, I hope the feed's coming through okay for everyone. It'll be really interesting to see what this looks like at the other end on Instagram Live, on our Instagram TV. Hope it's coming out okay. I'm going to take another division now. That'll include the majority of this. This section's slightly too big, so I'm leaving just a little bit out. You know, I'd always, even if it's just that little bit, it's very tempting to think, oh, you know, I'll just include it, I'll just throw it in with this. But if the section is too big, it could really distort the balance. And if the balance is distorted at this side, it will definitely be distorted throughout the whole of this side. So just be methodical in your approach when cutting hair, and you will easily establish what you're looking for. I'm just refining this shape here, and I'm working through. And you could do this on much longer hair. I'm sure many of you will know many clients of yours, and that would be suited for this haircut, particularly very thick. You know, if I was looking for a model to showcase this one, I would love someone with very thick hair, because I think it really works its best, true magic, when it's performed on very thick hair. I'm now going to take that little section in, as it just didn't quite fit into my sectioning pattern. And I'm just working through here, and working through at the sides. And I'm rounding. I'm just rounding slightly, only slightly. Even though it's a triangular layer, I just like to round that slight edge on the top. I'm making a visual assessment now of the back. As you can see, we've created this really shattered shape, and you could clearly see this is a restyle. We've totally restyled the interior of the hair, and it's going to look very different. Now I'm working with a side parting, so they're obviously going to be cut slightly different, and I'm cutting this to a specific parting. If you are cutting to side partings, you do need to make your clients aware of that it is actually cut to that specific parting, and that should they change it, it could distort the balance of the cut. If the clients typically tends to change their parting a lot, or I would always cut from centre, but if they wear a very specific parting, which is the style that I'm creating today, I would cut it to that parting. But hey, that's a little bit different for every hairdresser. I would advise you to work with your own mentors in salon, and also your salon procedures. Not all salons cut like that. So that's just how I choose to cut, really dependent on what the client actually wants. Sorry, I'm just pushing her back down. She keeps coming off the stand. Okay. So I'm just directing this back. Now, I've got quite a big section here, because obviously I'm working to a side parting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just divide this as well. Even though I didn't divide the other side was slightly smaller, remember? So I'm going to divide this. I'm going to direct it back towards, can you see this shape that I'm creating? I'm pulling it back and up like this, so the line will be triangular. And I'm just cutting through. And then it gets shorter towards the interior. Can you see my fingers point away? And that enables me to cut a line from short to long. And now what I can do is include these side sections, and I'm directing them up and over towards the crown. Everything's pulling right the way back. So your angle's quite extreme at this point. And just ensure everything is fully blended. Into the back. So again, you can see my elbow's quite high, and that's the actual elevation that we want to be creating when performing a haircut such as this. I'm going to work pivoting slightly through this section as well. I find that really helps when working with a restyle, because you've got a lot of hair to deal with. You're taking off a lot of hair. Even though it's going to be long still, it's going to have a really shattered interior shape. So again, I'm just dividing the sections as appropriate. I've just made that division there, as you can see. Just so I can cut this first, and then I'll pull this towards the guideline. And I'm really spending some time combing all sections until I feel confident that I'm in the right place to elevate the hair and cut the line that I wish to achieve. And again, it's just this triangular shape. That's going to give me this really nice soft shape. You'll see it once it's dried. And it looks great on long hair, really long hair. This is the technique that I would use most definitely in all my long haircuts. Transient length / triangular layer. Just going to take horizontal now, just to cross-check what I've done. And you can see I've just built up that triangular line. It gradually gets longer towards the front, and that's what we want. I'm going to take this last section into the layering, although I'm about to cut a fringe and to blend the sides. But I'm just going to take this off anyway, just to make sure it all blends in. But I'm going to be detailing this side section into a disconnected fringe. Disconnection is a great way to showcase a skill, whether you want to disconnect your top layers or whether you want to disconnect a fringe as well. And again, it's about showcasing those skills. So when you come to plan an EPA, your educator and also Gail Carrington, our training manager, will actually help you to devise just a strategy in terms of how you plan that EPA and what your models are and how you present the information to your assessor, because that's also vitally important to make sure that you showcase your skills in the best way. Okay, I'm just making a little assessment there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to detail this side section. Now I'm allowing the hair to fall naturally over the face in order for me to determine which parts of the hair will be cut into the side fringe. I'm then going to work some graduation through here just by directing away. I'm going to open my scissors and I'm going to slide cut through. I'm going to do the same with this fringe section now. Just need to assess what guide I want to, how am I going to take this in terms of a, yeah, and then you guys can see. Yeah, that's lovely. That's great. Sorry, I just need to get the camera angle right. So as you can see, this hair naturally wants to fall over the face. So I always look to see how the hair is naturally falling, because we're not always going to be there to blow dry their client's hair. And I find that if we artificially move that hair, we don't know what's going to fall. We don't know how it's going to work. So I always look to see, well, this hair is naturally sitting over the face. This hair would be definitely the fringe section. Whereas this hair, as we can see here, sits at the side. This hair here. So we don't need to include that for the fringe. So this is going to be my disconnected fringe. Now, if you want quite a heavy fringe, work with a low elevation, so very low, from 0 through to obviously 35, 45, anything up to 90. The higher that you elevate the fringe, the more textured the edge will become, to the point where you won't be building a line at all. In fact, you'll be layering one. So you've got to be mindful in terms of how much elevation you apply versus the line that you cut. So I'm actually going to slide cut a line through here now. I'm going to elevate this up and over. I'm going to measure it through to see where I want it to fall. I always take into account that I'm working with maximum tension at this point, so I don't want to over pull the hair. If I pull it and cut it too short, that's end game. There's nothing I can do at that point, but I can always cut it slightly longer, dry the hair, and then cut it shorter once more. And typically when I'm restyling a fringe from long to short, I would do this technique. Now I'm going to work with my scissors into the hair as shown. I'm now going to open the blade, and then with this thumb, I'm going to perform this movement. And what the scissors will do is that, and it will slide the hair through the hair. And this is slide cutting. So I've got the section. I do feel like my amount of elevation is right for what I want to create. I'm coming right in, and I'm just going to work down, and I'm going to start to slide cut through. And I'm just really gently, can you see, working the scissors through this section just to create the shape that I'm looking for. And then I slide off. And that will disconnect from the length. So this section is actually disconnected from the rest. Now I'm looking at what I've created. It's very teardrop-like. I don't necessarily want it too that vertical. I want it a little bit more diagonal. I'm going to go back in again. I always like the first section just to remove the length, especially when it's going from like this long to this short. I'm really happy where I started, but it went too vertical. So I've changed the angle of my scissors slightly to be more horizontal, so I can slide cut through. And then that's going to give me the disconnection from the sides. I'm now going to work to elevate this section up and over. So I'm going to pull in the opposite direction now, so up and over until I feel the first bits drop. When this drops, I know that everything inside here is the excess weight. I'm now going to slide cut through. So this is technique number 3, sorry. We block cut, we slide cut. And we're also doing some slicing. Now I typically tend to do this all dry, but I wanted to showcase that, because I do that sometimes on a fringe, and I'm going to say, it's going to be quite a long fringe, I'm going for something quite sort of chic and probably a little bit impractical, but I want to create a little bit of drama. Just over that one side. I still feel this area is going to be quite heavy, but I really want to see how it's going to look once it's been dried. I'm going to take this side section through here, I'm going to elevate it to graduation angle. So that's up and over from the length. I'm now going to take my scissors in and I'm going to slide cut down. That's just going to touch to that edge, just at the ends, but I'm going to keep this nice and long at this point. So what I did there, as you can see, I just textured that edge a little bit more. I'm going to do the same on the opposite side. I think I'll be able to showcase this a little bit better on this side. So I'm going to take that all in one. You can work all in one at this point. I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to work with my scissors behind my finger, and I'm just going to slide cut through. And this is just going to give me that really soft, shattered interior shape. Perimeter shape, sorry, because this is obviously detailing the perimeter. That's that perimeter details. And you can see what we've done here is we've still kept the length, but we've kept this longer shape. That's got this really shattering sort of interior through here as well. So just to recap, this is a restyle below shoulder, so this is perfect for an EPA. I've worked a really strong triangular layering pattern through the back to create a lot of texture and layers. I've then worked it through the sides, and I've also worked at a disconnected side fringe that's going to sit over here, and I've slide cut the sides. I can already see here in this section, I'm going to definitely want to take more weight out. But personally, what I really want to do is I want to dry it. So I'll do that off camera and I'll pop back on, and I'll either do that as a live, or I might just pre-record it and pop it on a TV or Instagram TV. Don't worry, either way, you're going to be able to see it, and it's going to be... Sorry, I think I lost you there. It's going to be popped on YouTube as well, and yeah, working through. Okay, right, so I'll come back once it has been dried. I'll see you very soon. Take care.